apologies. I just realized that you got to hit go live if you want to go live. So
Let's do it again.
Let's do it again. No, we've already got this recording, so we'll just run with it. But for anyone that's been waiting for us anxiously on Edmonton Sports Talk, my apologies. This is my first time running Restream, so we're going to continue moving on. Let's go back to Adam Fantilli here quickly, Victor. Victor Nuno, of course, joining us from EP Rinkside.
Yeah, what about Fantilli?
Just what preseason so far, what have you seen from him, and how does he look, and sort of what can you expect from him this season, do you think?
I mean, he looks really good, but it's always a grain of salt with preseason, right? Usually playing against not the best competition, but you have to like what he's done so far. He doesn't look out of place. He definitely looks like he can play in the league, but playing against some guys who probably aren't going to be in the league long term, it's a little, or maybe some of them might not be. It's a little hard to get the exact feel on how he's going to match up against some of the best in the league has to offer. I definitely think that he has a chance of being a middle six guy. I don't think that he's going to push his way to the top of the lineup in this first season. I think that's a little unrealistic, but I certainly think he can be around a 50 to 60 point guy, which I think if you're drafting him hoping he's going to hit his upside this season, you're going to be disappointed. But long term, super high outlook.
For sure. Fair enough. All right, just in case you missed it here at the top of the show that was not streaming live, tonight we're going to cover off preseason discussion and observations, our mailbag segment. We're going to talk about Colossal, Calder class, and general draft strategy and observations. Okay. All right. So let's talk some more preseason here then, Victor. So we got the first thing I wanted to touch on was Connor McDavid, Evander Kane, and Connor Brown. They've looked good together at times in training camp here, early in training camp. What's the ceiling for Kane and for Brown this season? Do you like any interest for you in Connor Brown in season-long redraft leagues, maybe?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have huge interest in Connor Brown for the value that he's going to get in the draft, because you can probably get him with a pretty late pick. And I think that, depending on how long he spends, I'm sure that a lot of that is going to be fluid for them. I don't know that he's going to spend, all the minutes, all 82 games on McDavid's wing, but that'd be pretty amazing if he could. And I think that he can probably get, somewhere in that 50 to 60, maybe more, depending on how things break. So I really like him, especially the cost of acquisition is going to be low. I know that you guys are a little bit higher on Kane than me. I just not sure that he has more upside than what he's kind of shown, in the past. He's an even strength monster and great category coverage, but I'm just, he hasn't been on the power play, and I don't think that he's going to get more power play role than he has in the past. And so that's going to limit his upside, to kind of be in that similar range, but a ton more peripherals, obviously. And so at even strength, he should be good. I think those two can be similar. And so I think, and considering where you can draft the two, Connor Brown's going to have more value.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I heard tonight, just preseason against, they're playing Vancouver tonight, I think, and someone had mentioned Connor Brown looked really good. So that is very positive for the Oilers for sure. One player I want to talk about in particular was John Klingberg, who was getting first crack on power play 1 with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm not sure if that's changed for tonight's games or anything, but Victor, I think a lot of us, that was the expectation. If you're signing John Klingberg, you're bringing him in. He's not a defensive defenseman. Is there any other reason other than to run your power play you're bringing John Klingberg in?
I mean, that's what I was saying, right? It's like, why do you bring him in other than to run the power play? And some people seem surprised and annoyed or whatever. Like, I think as soon as the signing happened, I was like, oh, that's going to be tricky for, Riley. We kind of knew that, but yeah, there's no reason to play John Klingberg at even strength or, heavy minutes. I mean, you're going to have to play him at some for even strength, but the whole point is to have him run the power play. That's his role. He was quite literally one of the worst defensemen defensively last season. And I don't think all of that was just Anaheim. He'd been kind of trending that way in Dallas. And so I'm not sure that you should be surprised. Does he play the entire season with that power play 1 deployment? I don't know. They'll probably mix it up a little bit, but I would expect that. So again, I think this represents value, because obviously Riley is going to have more overall value and even strength points, I would imagine. But in terms of where you can get John Klingberg, a lot of times in redraft leagues, he's going really late, like round 15 or so. And that's tremendous value if you can get a power play one quarterback that late, even if he does nothing but get you, 15, 20 power play points and, 40 points total or so. That's still great value for where you got him.
Yeah, I think John Klingberg is almost a lock most seasons for double digits in goals and 40 plus points, right? And like you said on the power play too. So, um, what about William Nylander? There was some interesting tinkering going on, as there always is in preseason. So I know there's some angry Leafs fans saying, "What is he doing on the third line?" And I saw another line today where he was playing at second line center and Tavares on the third line. So what are your? I mean, it doesn't mean a ton in preseason, but just
No.
what are your thoughts there?
My thoughts is that this is an overreaction for preseason as usual, so I think everyone just needs to settle down. I mean, he's William Nylander is quite literally a first line center on any other, a winger on any other team, but it just so happens they have another top line right winger, so he's going to get the minutes. He can probably play center, and Tavares has foot speed problems. He always has, and as he gets older, it's going to be a little bit more of an issue. And Nylander is so good, both ways. So I think that they're going to mix up the lines, but both of those guys are going to get a ton of minutes, more than probably their line mates. So I wouldn't be too worried about drafting Nylander, and having center eligibility will be good. And I seriously doubt he spends most of his minutes down the middle. He'll probably, take some face-offs. He'll probably switch back and forth, and he should be fine for deployment. So I mean, I think that you're gonna be fine with Nylander. I wouldn't worry too much about that. He's not gonna be stuck with the worst line mates all year. They're trying things out, and it might happen for a few games here or there when they need it, but I don't think it's gonna be a long-term thing.
Totally fair. Tyler Bertuzzi, meanwhile, took his expected spot next to Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. They look good in practice. I think, Victor, maybe that was you giving me a hard time. They'll probably not look quite as good when there's actual defensemen on the ice, but in practice they look good anyway. So, what are your thoughts? I'm pretty bullish on Tyler Bertuzzi for this season.
Yeah, that was a funny tweet. You're like, "Oh, this line looks great." I was like, "There's no defense there." Of course, but it's hard to imagine Bertuzzi not having a pretty good season. I mean, there was some ups and downs the last season, and he seemed like he was falling out of favor in Detroit, but he's clearly a talented offensive player. And if you look on the left side, it's like who's going to take those minutes from him? They have some potentials. I mean, I certainly think Matthew Nyes could earn his way up there, and so could Nick Robertson. But Bertuzzi has the inside track. He'd have to mess up repeatedly to not get the top deployment there, and that could happen. But I think that he's gonna get his points. He's playing with 100-point players, and he's gonna be good out there. And so I think that that's also pretty good value for Bertuzzi, especially people just drafting on what he did last year. I think that you're going to be able to get him, and I think he can probably approach 70-point pace ish. Depending if all breaks right. Kind of depends on that power play time. He's probably not on the top unit, but he might get some sniffs there, especially with injuries.
All right, good stuff. Logan Cooley, how big are you on Logan Cooley for next season? Because that he submitted an early bid for goal of the year in that global series. I thought that was pretty fantastic.
Oh my God. I watched that clip so many times, and there are probably 6 or 7 things he does at an elite level just in that one sequence. I mean, just every little thing from the give and go to the skating to the cutback, the curl and drag, the ability to stay with it under pressure and put the puck home. It was all incredible. And I think someone mentioned that it was Kopitar and one of the other top forwards out there that he did it against. It's not like he was playing against fourth line scrubs, so
It's Kempe.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was Kempe. I think Cooley is in for a really good season. In fact, I think I'm actually I'm doing a Central Division preview for EP Rinkside that's going to come out probably about a few days after this airs, and I think there's a pretty decent chance that Cooley ends up top line center by Thanksgiving. Maybe end of the year, if not sooner. And I think he's a good chance he has a better season than Hayton. I think he's more talented. Obviously, Hayton's a couple years down the line a little bit, so he has a little bit more experience. And I really like how Hayton finished last season, but you look at their center depth and it's not there. Like, Smalsh can play some center, and so could Keller, but they really are probably going to rely on one of those two to be their top line center. And I think that Cooley had a historic season in the NCAA last season. I think he's really ready for this opportunity, and he kind of announced his arrival. I think that, especially in redrafts, like, take a flyer on him, because you could be handsomely rewarded with a really strong season from him.
I agree that he's going to have a great season. I'm curious. So do you think Hayton's going to get the first crack with Keller and Schmaltz and power play one? Like, is that kind of his job to lose to start?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they were good to end the season. There's no question about it. Those three were really good, and I'm impressed with the steps that Hayton took. Especially, a lot of people had kind of left him for dead and thought that he was kind of a bust, and he struggled. His his time in the NHL had kind of yo-yoed between junior and different stints, and he kind of seemed like he finally put it all together. So really happy for him, and that was impressive. And I'm sure he gets first crack. And I do think that they'll probably tinker around with some options, even if they're kind of clicking. Probably less likely if they're clicking really well, but I do think that Cooley gets some opportunity, and I think that eventually he will show himself to be the more talented player. It's just a matter of how long it will take. Maybe it's, like I said, Thanksgiving, New Year. Maybe it's closer to the trade deadline, but I think that Cooley is really going to show himself out by the end of the year and potentially challenge Bedard. I think if there's another forward that can do it, I think it's Cooley. He has more to work with than Bedard. He's older, and I don't think he's more skilled, but he's bigger. He has a little bit. He has a couple things going for him. The skating and the size, and this environment is probably a little bit better, which is weird to say, right? The environment in Arizona is a little better than Chicago, but I think it's true.
I would agree with you. I actually I like what they've got going on in Arizona now, which is probably the first time I've ever said that. But they've got some interesting pieces there for sure.
Yeah.
Marco, yeah, no, it does. It doesn't feel right. Marco Rossi reportedly added 15 pounds of muscle this summer and altered his skating stride. Someone to put on your watch list?
Yeah, I think so. No truth to the matter that all that weight went to his thighs, but I think there's a good chance. Look at his thighs; they're enormous. But yeah, he's, I think we had Mike Clifford on my podcast last week, and he pointed out that, Rossi hasn't really had a full off season to fully train and prepare before this one. He had a lot of health issues and complications from COVID. I mean, he had inflammatory heart disease from his COVID complications. And so, he really hasn't had that opportunity to really come into the season fully prepared. And so I think that's going to really help. Like you hear about these guys, best shape of their life and all. And sometimes obviously it's just nonsense and noise, but I think it can really help some guys when they have a long off season of full training and preparation, especially when they really need it. And I think Rossi was someone who really did, who had been really good in the AHL. And I think did well in the NHL despite not scoring a lot of points. He really kind of held his own defensively, which is important. If you're going to get that top line assignment, you're going to have to play against the best of the best. And I think he can do that. I mean, you look at the center depth in Minnesota, it's not an insurmountable roadblock for him to pass. Joel Eriksson Ek, that's the other thing too, is Joel Eriksson Ek is someone who is a really good player, but he's a matchup line guy, right? They're going to put him against the other team's best players, and that's not what they're going to want for Kaprizov and Zuccarello. They're going to want to put a center who's more offensively capable and who can, create more. And you're not going to want Joel Eriksson Ek to be that guy. And Ryan Hartman could be, but is it possible that Rossi overtakes him? I think it's pretty possible, even this season, if not, towards the end of the season, next season. I think Rossi's coming and he's really looking good. I think that maybe you don't draft him, but you definitely put him on the watch list. And if you see him getting that opportunity, you might want to be quick on the trigger to add him.
Okay, good stuff there. We're going to move on to Tyler's favorite subject, the Calgary Flames. Starting with Yegor Sharangovich, who is slotting in on the right side next to Huberdeau and Lindholm. Huberdeau looked pretty good in that 10-0 throttling over the Vancouver Canucks. A couple goals for him. I think Kadri had a couple points. Markstrom stopped all the shots he faced. So again, preseason, you look at the rosters that they're icing on the other side, it's maybe not that exciting. But nonetheless, I'm curious about Sharangovich for this season. So does he have some upside potential for you, Victor? 42 points and 21 goals is our projection for him, but skating next to those two players, maybe there's a lot more upside.
Yeah, I maybe. I think I agree with that projection. He's someone that we have seen get good deployment and kind of still be right in that range, right? Like he didn't necessarily do too much with it when he was in New Jersey. So I'm not sure. There's upside. Yes. Will he get there? I think is what I'm a little skeptical with. And I know that this is a safe zone for bagging on Calgary Flames, but that's not necessarily my objective here, but yeah, I think that he's someone who often can disappoint a little bit. Like, oh, you have so much opportunity, and you still kind of didn't do as much with it as I would have hoped. But yeah, I think he can be in that 50-point range. And what's different than in New Jersey is there isn't a ton of competition for him, on that side, and so he could certainly get a good chance. I mean, Dubé, maybe Coleman, who's just more of a third liner anyways, but they got some young kids. If they give them the opportunity, Coronado, Peltier, then maybe, but it's probably Sharon Govich's role to lose, and it's probably going to be a little hard for him to do that. So he'll probably get tons of opportunity. And yeah, I like him. Definitely more of a depth guy, though. I'm not sure that he's probably more of like a super streamer, I would imagine, kind of right on that borderline. But yeah, I do think he's got some pretty decent upside.
Yeah, I think, and good for him too, is that Pelche actually suffered a shoulder injury too, right? So now I'm just I'm wondering if there's a little more opportunity for Sharon Govich. But Bruce, I'm going to bring you in here. Oh man, you guys in the chats are fun. Matty Coronado had a hat trick actually in his game in that 10-0 win that I mentioned before that. So Bruce, any interest in Coronado for this year?
I think so. In the late rounds, I think I would definitely take a flyer at him. I think he's going to get top 6. At least that's what he's been playing so far in the preseason. And well, obviously he's looked pretty good. Peltier's injury could be interesting, but I think he's projected more lower down the lineup. But no, I definitely take a flyer on him.
All right, and then Tyler, Michael Backlund. The Flames signed Michael Backlund to a 2-year contract and immediately slapped the C on him. Was that the right pick for the captaincy? And any interest in Backlund this year for fantasy purposes?
I don't have any interest in him. I think it was the right choice. Kind of weird that it was only a 2-year contract. I know his age at 34, he's getting up there, but right pick for the captain. I really don't like. That's a late round pick for me. Really good defensive player though.
Yeah, it's. I'm surprised he signed, to be honest. Like I really thought he was on his way out, but it seems to me anyway that Sutter leaving has alleviated a lot of problems in that dressing room.
Yeah, it's too bad.
It's really unfortunate. Yeah, too bad.
Nice. Yeah.
All right. According to Greg Wyshynski, Mike Sullivan said the power play is very important to Eric and Chris, so we'll start with both of them on the top unit, and we'll see how it goes. We've got a lot of options. So Bruce confirmed it's going to be Erik Karlsson and Chris Letang to man the power play, at least to start, kind of shattering our theory on Karlsson manning the power play.
Yeah. Did you imagine, though, you've got Letang, Karlsson, Malkin, Crosby, and Gensel. Those 5. Like, that's kind of scary a little bit.
That's number two power play in the league.
Definitely.
Well, I was just going to ask that. So, John, you think they're going to improve on their 14th overall power play from last season?
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. Victor, anything to say on that? Like, for me anyway, Chris Letang now has a little more appeal than he did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, in general, these kind of situations, I just shy away from it because I want the guy who I know is going to be on there most of the season, if not all. And so I'm not going to get Erik Karlsson in any league probably because he's going to go first and probably should. But I definitely like the value later on in Letang because, yeah, he seems like he's going to get some opportunity. And I'm sure they're going to try it. And I've seen this movie before. It doesn't work. So they're going to go to it. They're going to try it. It's not going to work. They're going to flip back and forth. They're going to try both of them. And then one of them is eventually going to run away with it. I think it's going to be Erik Karlsson. But I don't want that frustration on my bench, on my team, and having them go back and forth and seeing rostering Karlsson and then having Letang have his run for 4 or 5 games. It's going to be really frustrating. So in general, I'm just going to kind of avoid the situation and take someone else. But I think that overall, Erik Karlsson is going to come out ahead, but they're both going to have value for sure.
Well, and Chris Letang has always been a bit better for category coverage anyway. So if you're in a bangers league and you count, PIMs and blocks and shots, or not necessarily shots, but some of those other peripheral categories, he's going to provide some better coverage for you.
Shifts.
Got to get those shifts, boys. Speaking of D-men, we're going to stick with that. The Athletics' Max Boltman posted that the Red Wings had both Moritz Seider and Shane Gostisbehere on power play 1. Tyler, I've got more interest now in Moritz Seider. Like, I was concerned about him losing power play time. That doesn't appear to be the case, at least for now. Do you have any more interest in Seider or Gostisbehere either way?
Always interest in Seider. I mean, Gostisbehere, he does put up points, but I don't know. I don't think that's gonna stick. I think it's probably gonna end up being Mo Seider on there and Gostisbehere on the second power play unit. Really, I mean, he's more of a forward than a defenseman anyway. So I'd still take Mo Seider over the Ghost anyways.
And I think, well, Victor, for dynasty keeper purposes, that's obviously a no-brainer.
Oh yeah, I mean, you want Seider long term. He's the man, and he's going to get way more total time on ice and more peripheral category coverage. We had Max on Fantasy Hockey Life, and he talked a lot about how Seider probably just tried too hard and had a lot of expectations after the Calder Trophy season, and he just really wasn't good. He struggled a little bit, sophomore slump, whatever you want to call it. And so I think that he really needed to figure some things out, and he needed to kind of change a little bit of the way he was playing. And I think that this season is going to be back to what he did in his first season, if not more. So I really think that big things are in store for Seider. And I do kind of also think that they might just have both kind of alternating. Maybe they'll have a different role for Seider. I mean, Gostisbehere is, I think more of kind of a playmaker, walk the line kind of a defenseman, and Seider has a better shot. So maybe they use him in different roles and kind of alternate. But I think Seider is going to get his time and on the power play, but also just way more category coverage because he's going to be out there a ton. He's going to have tons of shots, blocks, hits. So he's going to be a beast. I would not shy away from taking him, but certainly later on, Gostisbehere could be some really good value.
All right, let's move the conversation here. Actually, we got one more defensive pair to talk about here, and that's Tony DeAngelo. Had a goal and an assist in Carolina's first preseason game, a 5-2 victory over Tampa. The Hurricanes are actually utilizing DeAngelo and Burns on the power play as well. So it seems to be a lot of this tandem D-man on the power play. I know for me personally, I'm probably fading that situation. Bruce, which way are you leaning? I know you've been a DeAngelo guy in the past. Any insight on this one?
I'm leaning towards DeAngelo. It's kind of this. It's the same kind of thing as you look at Klingberg in Toronto and kind of where they get Carlson in Pittsburgh. DeAngelo isn't much of a defenseman to defend, but he's a heck of a power play quarterback, and I think that's why they brought him in. So they may start with Burns there with both of them, but I think in the end it's DeAngelo's power play it's for him to run. They need some help there. Power play took a drop last year after he went to Philadelphia, and they brought him back in to get that power play working again.
All right. Zach Benson. Victor, I want to talk to you about Zach Benson. I had someone ask me if you would take Zach Benson or Will Smith. Is there a case to be made to take Zach Benson in a dynasty format over Will Smith?
Yeah. I mean, I think he's got more upside, but he also has a little bit more risk. He's smaller. And I think you also have to consider the fact that Buffalo has an absolutely stacked prospect pool. And so Benson is probably the best forward in that pool, but they have a lot of great options. And Will Smith is far and away the best forward in the San Jose pool. And he has top line center 1C potential. Will he hit that? I don't know. We'll see. He's on track. He has a lot of work to do at Boston College, but he's bigger. He has a higher draft pedigree. He's in a weaker prospect pool. So I think there's a good argument to be made that maybe Will Smith is a bit safer, but Zach Benson represents more upside. And I'm of the belief that the cream pushes its way to the top. And I think that is Benson. And I think he will push his way past, guys like Kulik, Savoy, and, tons of the other guys there in that pool. So I do think that it kind of depends on how risk averse you are. If you're like, I want the home run, then take Zach Benson. If you're like, I want a little bit of a safer option with still really good upside, then I think Will Smith is perfectly reasonable.
Okay. And I bring that up, of course. I'm not sure if any of you guys saw it, but Benson made a nice little no-look backhand pass to Jeff Skinner the other night and put them up 1-0 against Boston. So Buffalo looks good this year. Devin Levi stopped all 19 shots he faced against Boston as well. We'll talk about Devin Levi a little bit later. Tyler, Capo Caco, he opened the scoring against the Islanders this week. Is he finally going to break out this season?
This is the year. This is the year it happens.
Yeah, guaranteed. Book it.
Book it. Write it down somewhere or record this or whatever.
If only.
I think we're on it. I think it's now recording and live streaming.
Okay, good. Okay, good. I think it's time. Like I think it's time. It's kind of now or never for him. This is what, year 4 now. He's gonna have top 6 ice time. He's gonna have all the opportunity to do it. So this is the year.
Yeah, I think good value on Caco too. I don't know his exact ADP, but he's going pretty late. Victor, Mike Rupp had actually predicted 30-plus goals for Caco this year, and we've talked about it on a previous episode as well. Is that something you can foresee happening this season?
No, I'm definitely not with you, Tyler. Sorry about that.
I'm with you.
Yeah, that's great. You all can hang out together.
Make sure this is recorded. This is recorded.
Yeah. I'm definitely not a Caco believer. I've watched him very closely, and I've watched some of the. I just don't think he has the finishing ability at this level. It's frustrating because I've seen it at lower levels, and he's a pretty reasonable defensive forward, but I don't think he has the finishing. I don't think he has the offensive creativity, and I certainly think New York is partly to blame for all of this because I don't think they developed him very well. But in the end, he is what he is now, and he's already 240 games into his NHL career. I don't think that a super big breakout is coming. I know that a lot of people use that 200 game threshold, and just because he's past it doesn't mean it can't happen. But I think that from what I've seen, I'm not buying it. I actually sold him in one of my leagues for Urov and McGroarty, which some people might think is selling low, but I like those two players, and I think that they certainly haven't proven that they're bad NHLers yet. So I would rather kick the can down the line a little bit and just see what they're going to do. But no, I'm not putting my money on Caco, but hope he does it for his sake and for Tyler's sake.
I mean, I could be sold on that. I think that given the deployment, he definitely is going to be better than he has been in past years. But to what degree? I guess we'll find out. I was just going to look up his ADP here, but let's see if I can find it. 283 in Fantrax. It's really interesting, actually, the discrepancy between Fantrax and Yahoo. So Fantrax would tell you that a lot of people agree with Victor, and it's not happening. And then you go to Yahoo, and he's going at 167. But again, that's probably where you find your more casual fans, right, Victor?
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly the casual fan versus potentially the more serious, and certainly a lot of that represents Dynasty and other formats as well. So it might be skewed a little bit for Fantrax, but I find usually the Yahoo ADPs kind of just laughable and all over the place, and the Fantrax ADPs, while maybe a little bit more conservative for some people, a little bit more in line with what you might expect.
There you go. All right. We're going to go to break here shortly, but before we do, Alex DeBrincat had 2 assists for the Red Wings in a 4-3 win over the Penguins. Mo Seider scored on the power play there as well. Alex DeBrincat, we've been on record saying that we think he's going to have a bounce-back season. I don't think he was really happy in Ottawa. John, do you like the Cat this year?
I do. Yeah, like you said, that season in Ottawa wasn't a good one. So no, I like him coming into Detroit, being more of a bigger name there. Definitely excited for what he has to offer.
I think we've got him projected for 40 goals and 80 points here. So, Victor, is that a realistic projection for you?
Yeah, I think so. And I actually just wrote on him too for my preview for where are they in the Atlantic Division? Must be, because that's what I wrote on. I definitely agree with you guys. I think that, there were so many things that went wrong. And I think when we talked to the beat reporter for Ottawa, Murray Pam, he said, I can't remember how many he said, but there was some ridiculous number of crossbars and posts that he hit last season. So he was creating a lot. He was a little unlucky. His shooting percentage was the second worst of his career. He, had his unlucky metrics were some of the worst of his career. His PDO, his IPP, all of these scream regression. And the last time he had a season that was, quote unquote, this bad was 2019-20 when he had a 53-point pace, and he followed that up with a near 90-point campaign. So I think you might even be underestimating what he can do. I think he can, hit point per game plus. So I'm pretty excited about DeBrincat for this season, especially you're getting him typically at pretty decent value, like 5th or 6th round or later. So I'd be pretty happy with that. I got him in a couple leagues.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Victor. With that, we're just going to run a break here for a couple minutes. We will be right back. All right, and we are back with Victor and Nuno from EP Rinkside, Fantasy Hockey Life Podcast, Dobber Prospects Reports, on and on and on. One of the best fantasy guys around. It's time for some mailbag questions, but before we do, I just want to mention, if you aren't already subscribed, make sure you go over to youtube.com/heavyhockey and follow us over there. We're going to be live streaming, of course, this show, but also Michael and Dash will be Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. live streaming there. So be sure to check it out. And with that, we're going to go to a few of these questions here. So, Victor, this is from Electrical Isopod. I think this is from Reddit. In the 19th to 12th round, based on Yahoo ADP, do right wing or D have a higher value over replacement?
9th or 12th, right? Not 19th. I think
9th to 12th. Sorry, I don't know what I said. 9th to 12th.
The 90th round.
The 90th round.
This is a good question. I think that it's right wing I have found to be one of the weakest, especially at the top end. So in a couple of my drafts, I'm definitely kind of leaning towards those high end right wings, like your Rantanens and your Kucherovs. If you can get one of those high end ones, I think it makes it a little bit easier later on to kind of fill in with what's available. But I think in general, in this range, 9 through 12, some of those D that are getting potentially top power play become really interesting, right? So I think there's probably a little bit better value of the D over replacement, because a lot of these right wings really tend to thin out, when you get to this range. So I would probably be looking to add one of those Ds. And some of these guys, might even still, some of the like Justin Falks, or like certainly your Sean Durzees are going to be available a little bit later. And I think that those guys can represent pretty good value, especially may take a step forward, getting new opportunities. So I think that they can probably represent a little bit more than what the right wings are going to give you, which oftentimes are going to be just shared deployment time, top power play time, and not necessarily be guaranteed anything and kind of move up and down. So in this range, I'm probably looking more at D than right wing.
Okay, totally fair. Tyler, any additional thoughts on that?
No, I totally agree with that. I think I'd be going for D at that point.
Alrighty. This one is from Connor McFarr. I'm drafting 12th in a 12-player single-season snake draft banger league. Standard skater cats. Goalie categories are saves, wins, save percentage, and goals against average. My first pick in mocks ends up being between Tage Thompson, Jack Hughes, and Sidney Crosby. After the last episode, I've been taking Hughes for top power play and scoring. With my next pick, I can either take a top-tier goalie, usually Shesterkin or Vasilevsky, or I can take Brady Tkachuk or Crosby. So the question being between Shesterkin or Vasilevsky, Brady Tkachuk or Crosby, who would you choose in this format? Thanks in advance. Love the pod. Keep up the great work. So Victor, I'll go to you first with this one. What do you think?
Well, it's way too early to take a goalie, in my opinion. So that pretty much rules out goalie. I mean, I get it. Like Vasi Shesterkin are great, but if you just, if you look at the historical data, it's fairly likely that one of the goalies you can get in the 10th round or later is going to be similar to those guys. You're not going to find a Brady Tkachuk or Sidney Crosby in round 10. It's not going to happen. So you take those guys, you roll the dice on a goalie. I'm in a draft right now. I just got Philip Gustafsson in round 10. Okay. Is he as good as Vasilevsky? Definitely not. But might he have a similar value depending on your point structure? It's not unreasonable, right, to think that they might be similar. But whoever you get, in that range is not going to be anywhere close to Crosby or Tkachuk. So I just think you take the value, you take the forwards. I've pretty much been going forward for like the first 4 or 5 rounds, and then considering, maybe a D, and goalie not till round 10 or later is pretty much my strategy.
That's kind of what I've been doing as well. If you kind of miss out on those top tier of defensemen, if you can't get yourself a Cale Makar, a Roman Josi, someone in that ilk, then you're gonna, for me anyway, just go to forwards, and then, like you said, maybe a goalie after round 10, and then those D-men later as well. Next question here is from Party in the Korea. Would be interested to hear your thoughts on where to draft Connor Bedard in the first year of a keeper league, top 10 or lower. And Bruce, I'll start with you because I know we've talked about Connor Bedard plenty in past episodes.
Yeah, in a keeper league, I would probably draft him fairly high. I just, when I read the original question, I thought it was dynasty league, so I'm like, well, yeah, you're drafting him like as high as you can. But keeper league, yeah, I think I would be tempted, depending on how long the keepers you're allowed to hang on to them for, because some have time limits. You can only keep them for a couple of seasons, the same player. But I think I would still pick him pretty high because this year, well, not really sure, but the next couple of years, he's going to be really good. At least he's showing anyway.
Okay. John, I saw you raise your hand. You want on this one too?
But you got to unmute your microphone, John.
You have to unmute your microphone, John.
I would do that, wouldn't I? I'm going to say if somehow McDavid is on the table, yeah, you take McDavid. But honestly, I'm taking him number 2.
Wow.
Straight up.
I mean, there's lots of Tyler. There's lots to like about Bedard. For me, that's too early. I don't know if in like a standard, like in a redraft, season long redraft, but it's also a keeper. I don't know. I mean, probably not top 10 for me, to be honest, because there's just not a lot in Chicago this year. Like maybe not for the next couple years, because there's a lot of great players in the top 10 still, right? Like I love Bedard, but I don't know. Victor, what's your thoughts on this? Because we've talked it about length this offseason, and we've had lots of questions about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tricky, but I think I would do it because, like Bruce said, depending on the structure. But I joined, Cam roped me into joining this EP Rinkside league where we drafted a whole new keeper league, and I had 1.1, so I was going Connor either way, whether it was McDavid or Bedard. But I mean, obviously there are plenty of other good options, but I felt like it was too early to do it there. That's just kind of silly, I think. But Cam took him at 6th overall, took Bedard, and so I mean, you're set up for what, 15, like 2 decades maybe of elite production, assuming there's not a penalty for keeping your first round or whatever. Yeah, I think there's a pretty decent argument there, especially if you have like a minor flex spot where you can flex them up and down. Like that kind of seals the deal for me if you could do that, because then you're getting basically a free stream of a potentially point per game player. But I hear you, Devin, too. Like it might be hard to pass up some of those really elite options that are going to be probably better for the next year, maybe 2. But I think it's going to be close. I know some people think Bedard can get 90 points this year. I'm not in that camp, but it's not going to be far away. And I think it's not out of the realm of possible that he could do it this year, but he also doesn't have much to work with. But I think that the elite players, you're already starting to have the conversation of, no, who's playing with him? That's the question, not who he's playing with.
Yeah, I like Bedard, don't get me wrong. We actually had him projected for 42 goals and 74 points. So we're not down on Bedard. Yeah. And too, Bruce, like you said, the structure really does matter in that case.
You're just a hater.
No, I like the player. I like the player a lot. I mean, but it's just, it seems a little early, but that's okay. Next question here from Brian Smith. Goalies are Devin Levi, Sergei Bobrovsky, Stuart Skinner, and Akira Schmid. Spencer Knight, Philip Grubauer, Cam Talbot, Karel Vejmelka, not Karen Vejmelka, Dustin Wolf, Joseph Wool, Jack Campbell, and some others. I'm Luke Warmon are available. Should I try to secure Spencer Knight to complete the tandem? Vejmelka in hopes that the Coyotes surprise, or hope Schmid doesn't get sent to the minors for playing time. Goalie Cats are 6 points for a win, -1 point for a loss, -1 point for a goal against. Shutouts are 4 points, and saves are 0.2. So I guess, Victor, how do you see this one?
Well, he's got some really good goalies, so that's lovely. I personally, I don't know how you guys feel, but I really dislike having a tandem. To me, it's a waste of a roster spot. I would rather, I mean, obviously, I think in a perfect world, we'd all rather just have the top goalie, like
Mhm.
duh, right? But I would rather take the chance and guess on that than roster 2 that I know I'm only going to get 1 start from. So I think that, you know, Bob, he's got Bob. I would not try to get I would try not, I wouldn't go for Spencer Knight. I think that there are some reasonable options there that he could go for, like Wool, probably represents pretty decent value. I wouldn't be touching Jack Campbell, sorry. But, someone like Grubauer, maybe Velmelka. I mean, in a points league, maybe Velmelka, but I also think that Schmid is the best goalie in New Jersey. And I think he's going to show that over the year. And he's got 4 good ones. I probably wouldn't be looking at goalie if I were him, frankly. He's got 4 good ones, and why waste that roster spot on a tandem goalie when you could, probably use it for something else, is my thought.
Yeah, I mean, there's some uncertainty there too, right? So Bobrovsky, like, you're not always entirely sure what you're going to get from that guy. Stuart Skinner looked good last year. Devin Levi, though, so I guess based on your response, that you think Devin Levi is gonna be the starter in Buffalo this year.
I do. I think that this is also something I wrote over at EP. I know that it doesn't happen very often, and people are, skeptical that because rookie goalies tend not to, be volume starters. But I do think that he is that good. He is already the best goalie in Buffalo. I'm sure they're not going to give him 60 starts because that's crazy. But I think that he's probably going to end up with the majority, or at least a fair amount. And barring breaking down and playing too much, I think he's the guy. I mean, Comrie UPL have really shown that they're not what it takes to be a volume starter. And he was awesome in that small sample size. He did not look out of place. He was one of their best players down the stretch when they needed him most. He didn't crumble under the pressure. So I'm all aboard the Devin Levi hype train. And I think that if anyone wins the Calder other than Bedard, it might just be Levi, because it's hard to equate goalie and skater value. But if the Sabres make the playoffs and Levi is the starter most of the year, I don't know how you don't give it to him. Even if Bedard scores 70 points, whatever. I think that what's the value to a team that is probably going to finish bottom 3? I think Levi has a good case if he does that.
Yeah, I am bullish on Levi for this season too. Schmid, for as good as he was last year in New Jersey, I still think that the Devils want to acquire an actual bona fide workhorse goaltender. And is there? I know in-season trades are tough, right? But is there any chance that they make a trade for Connor Hellebuck or another goaltender like that, or is it just they're going Vanacek, Schmid, and that's it?
I mean, I think that they would be open to that if they can make the money work. I think that there's probably more of a desire to trade and sign than just rental, because I think the assets that Winnipeg might be asking for might be a little much. So if they can trade and sign for him, sure. I mean, I think that is on the table. I think they probably want to see how the beginning of the season goes, because, last year Schmid came in at the end and they were kind of running Vanacek and they had some Blackwood in there. It really wasn't great. And that was definitely a big issue for them. They are such a good team. I mean, frankly, that's the other issue. They're such a good team. It might not matter too much who's back there, right? I mean, they kind of showed that at times. Like, we're just going to score 5 or 6 goals, and it doesn't matter. But yeah, they probably are going to be interested in that. But they have also a great prospect pool. It's just a matter of, I don't think they certainly don't want to use some of those assets. There might be some other ones that they are okay giving up, and then they just have to make the money work.
Fair enough. Amongst those goaltenders, I had suggested to him Philip Grubauer, Karel Vejmelka, Joseph Woll as well. I wonder about Dustin Wolf. To me, that one seems like a bit of a long shot at this point, with just given the contract situations in Calgary. But I do know that Elite Prospects had Dustin Wolf slated, I believe, for around 30 or 33 starts. So, Victor, any chance we see Dustin Wolf play 30-some games this season?
Well, I mean, there's always a chance if Dumb and Dumber taught us anything, but I don't think that it's very likely. I love Dustin Wolf. He's one of my favorite prospect goalies, and I think he will eventually prove himself. He has had to do that at every level. No one has believed in him. He's too short, whatever the case may be, but he just has proved it at every level, and he will in the NHL. But as you said, there's probably too big of roadblocks, and I do like Markstrom for a bit of a bounce back this season. I think he's not as bad as he showed last year, and Calgary was a bit of a mess. So I do think that Markstrom will bounce back, but Wolf is there. He's waiting in the wings. I don't think it's this year. I don't think it's his season this year, but I think in another year or two, he probably will be the volume starter in Calgary. So I think it's just a little premature to expect that, but certainly keep your eye on him, because if there's an injury or things go sour and Markstrom doesn't bounce back, then they will give him an opportunity. And I think once they give it to him, he's going to run with it, because he is really freaking good.
All right. The other thing I wanted to mention quick, I think Philip Grubauer in this particular format, given that you're getting 6 points for a win, he kind of sticks out to me. I think that's a player. Like, he played really well in that first round series against the Avalanche. He played really well actually at times down the stretch in the second half of the season too. So, and could have volume as well. I don't think there's really anyone challenging him for starts really in Seattle. So, but Tyler, what do you think? Is there anyone in that list that really jumps off the page for you?
Jack Campbell, but
of course, yeah.
For wins, like I know I'm the opposite of Victor. If I could put a tandem together, I do it with forwards. I would be fine doing it with goalies too, especially on a team that is going to be kind of a 50-win team.
We hope, Tyler. Don't jinx it.
Hypothetically, probably, maybe. I would rather do that than some of these backup guys, unless you're going to stream them. And that would be the other option. But Jack Campbell, I think Jack Campbell is going to be more of the 1A than the 1B to Skinner. So I would go with him.
All right. We got about 5 minutes here, guys, and we're going to go to break before we jump into the Colossal Calder class. One last question here, though, from Charlie P. I'm picking second, 10-man league, snake draft, non-keeper, in a head-to-head categories league with hits and blocks. Draisaitl is my first pick. Excellent selection. Where do you think I should be drafting Timo Meier and JT Miller? With my second and third picks, or are there better options? And John, I'll go to you. I haven't heard from you in a while.
I was looking at I don't know where I'd see. I've never been high on Timo Meier or JT Miller, so that's making it tough for me.
Right now, Meier's going 36.6 in Yahoo. Where's he going in Fantrax? Check that here.
I think it should be Meier. I think he's going to have a big season.
Yeah, 23rd
I think.
overall.
Yeah, I'll take Meier over JT Miller any day. I've never been high on Meier, but he's consistently mediocre. He's not average. I guess average is the word I'm looking for. Not mediocre. I'd say average. Yeah, no. He's not a terrible player, but he's not someone that ever pops out to me that I'm ever really going to just stick out there to target. But yeah, I guess I'd say Timo Meier in that fourth round.
If he's still there.
Yeah, I'm just looking. He's going kind of early, JT Miller.
Yeah, you look at the Yahoo
20
is Miller's in the third, Meier's in the third and Miller's in the fourth.
Yeah, Miller's going 27th right now in Fantrax.
I think that's super early for both of them.
Well, I could see Meier because I love the shot rate. JT Miller category coverage, but I don't love the situation so much. Victor, what do you think? Where do you weigh in on this one?
Well, I think, was it Tyler that said? Was that you that said you like Meier? All right. Well, I can agree with you now, finally. So that's good. I definitely, I know you're waiting for my affirmation, so you're welcome. But I know, I think that Meier is, people are sleeping on him. I think he got paid for one thing. He is literally the highest paid player on the New Jersey Devils now, or the forwards anyways. And so contract dictates a lot. He's going to get all the opportunity. He's going to be with an elite center, either Hischier or Jack Hughes. He's going to be on that top power play. There's no question he's going to be on that top power play. He shoots a ton. He's got pretty decent peripheral coverage too. Almost two hits a game, and pretty decent for blocks, and he's someone who, the underlings have always kind of favored him. It wasn't until he got the time on ice in the power play. I mean, I watched him really closely in San Jose for many years. He never got the power play opportunity or the time on ice to show what he could do, but the rate stats always suggested that he was really good. And I was calling him a superstar breakout when he had that 47-point season. I thought it was crazy, but then he popped for a point per game the following season, and he had a little bit of an unluckiness this past season. Even though he had 40 goals, I think he's in line for even more. And the other thing about the Devils is they have quite literally one of the best off night schedules. So if you're worried about schedule, like, you can probably fit him in more nights than you can for some of your other players, which you generally don't think about with one of your first two picks. But if it might be a bit of a tiebreaker, I think, if you're just drafting on what happened last year, I could understand not feeling like you're reaching for Timo Meier. But personally, I would take him at the end of the second, early third for sure. Like, he I think is going to have an absolutely monster season. So I'm all on Timo Meier, and I agree with what you said, Devin, about JT Miller. Like, I just don't love the Canucks situation. I think he's great and he covers a lot. He's a good player, but I think the trajectory of the team would be the tiebreaker for me. And the Devils are up, and Vancouver is, maybe.
Not so exciting. The other part of this question was, would you pick Tim Stützle over Mika Zibanejad?
Yes, all day long.
Yep.
And yeah, I'll
guess
agree
I'm
with that as
a
well.
no on that. I'm the only no on that one.
What?
You're the only no.
Give your head a shake.
I thought it would be Devin.
Well, you guys know I love Zibanejad, but not in this
Man
case.
crush.
Like, no, Stützle, man, he is going to be. Well, he was fantastic last year, but I mean, he's going to be as good, possibly better this year.
I need to see another year before I'm convinced.
He's Leon Draisaitl light.
You're late.
I'm late.
What did you say, Devin?
I said he's Leon Draisaitl light. He's another German superstar.
Real
Bro.
light, but yeah.
Real light,
Light.
but
Light.
definitely not as handsome either.
Overrated.
Almond milk to whole milk. Light.
Oh boy. All right. We got about 30 seconds here, guys. I think this is probably just a good time to take a break, unless there's anything else you guys want to elaborate on for Stützle or Zibanejad.
No, I think I said what I needed to.
All righty.
You're wrong.
Fair enough. Okay, well, we'll take a short break here, and then we'll get into the Colossal Calder class. This is going to be an interesting topic here with Victor, obviously knowing as much as he does about the Calder class. So we'll see you guys in a couple minutes. All right, and we are back with Victor and Nuno talking about the Colossal Calder class for 2023-2024. Victor, this is going to be a really interesting Calder race this year, probably the most interesting one in recent memory.
Yeah, I would agree. Usually the youngest players, the 18-year-olds, don't win the Calder. The last one who did was, anyone know? Anyone?
Bueller?
Superstar for the Avalanche was Nathan McKinnon.
McKinnon.
So yeah, it's been a long time, and that's just because it's really hard to be amazing year old. And even though McDavid was, he had injuries and there were some other issues, so there have been some good candidates, but it takes a lot for that to go right. But I think obviously Bedard has a good chance this year. That's what everyone's thinking. But we talked about Cooley, we talked about Levi. There's some other older guys that are coming into a good situation. Matthew Nyes, is another example who things could go really right for them. So, and there's probably like 15 goalies that have a chance to steal the starting job and do something. So it's going to be interesting for sure. And a lot of it just depends on usually if they play the full season and how the team does and all. There's so many factors. So It's going to be an interesting one. Usually it's kind of like the guy who's 19, 20 stepping into the league and kind of tears it up. But this year it's going to be a mix. It's going to be fun.
Or John's favorite, when there's a 29-year-old that comes from Russia, Artemi Panarin, excuse me, cough, wins the Calder, or who's the other one? Michael Bunting.
Yeah, it was Kaprizov.
Kaprizov.
Yeah, but yeah, no, that's ridiculous. That better not happen.
Ever
again.
Okay, fair enough. On that note, I just want to mention a couple things about this segment and just what we're talking about here. So the NHL's eligibility for rookie status says that a player cannot have played more than 25 games in any single preceding season, nor in 6 or more games in each of any 2 preceding seasons, and must not have attained his 26th birthday by September 15th of the season in which he is eligible. And then players here that we've listed, so they're listed according to DraftKings odds for the 2023-2004 Calder Trophy, And then I limited the main topics of conversation for players that we felt were going to have either a lock or more likely to be an impactful player for this season. So we're going to start with Connor Bedard here. Victor, I mean, you mentioned him already, and a lot of people tend to sort of just gloss over Bedard just because we all have high expectations for him. Is there anything else we should keep in mind? I mean, I think maybe something we don't talk about enough is he actually does cover some other categories, like hits, for example, that people just maybe don't consider as much. And John, you could probably have something to say about that too.
Go ahead, John.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, he's not a huge guy, but he definitely brings a little bit of a physical presence with him too. So, yeah, it's definitely something that he covers that people don't look at.
Yeah. Actually, one thing I do over at Fantasy Hockey Like is kind of look at some of the peripheral coverage, and Bedard does rank out as excellent. So he's got actually more than the hits. I have him tracked for better blocks than average, for like really good blocks for a forward, but I don't know if that'll translate to the NHL. So we'll see if he ends up doing that. But yeah, he is a bit of a smaller guy. I think that's one thing to consider too. Like, people are talking about him scoring 90 points or whatever. Like, everyone's going to be trying to take his head off. And I know he's had that happen his whole career. He's always played against bigger, stronger, faster opponents, and he's always been able to avoid that. But these are the best of the best, and they're really good at getting in his way. And I know that he had some pretty good preseason stuff, but we'll see if it translates to the NHL. I'm not saying it's not during the regular season, but I knock on wood, I hope it doesn't happen, but I think it's not unreasonable that he gets, a slash on the wrist and misses, several weeks or something like that. And he might just have a hard time being an all 82 and scoring that many. So that would just be a slight concern. But I also think the other thing we need to consider is something I kind of mentioned earlier. We should also be thinking about who's playing with him, because he's that good already. That was something that I was saying about Kaprizov in his rookie season. People were saying like, well, who is he going to play with? And I was like, no. Who is playing with him? He is that good already. And Kaprizov showed that. I think Bedard is already going to be to that point. Like, he's the whoever's on his line, and everyone kind of thinks it's going to be Taylor Hall, but it might be, Radish, or there might be other people that get that opportunity, and they're going to be interesting, for streamers. So that, I think, is a big thing to consider. We don't usually talk about that with rookies, but he's an exception.
We've talked about defensemen that you could get late that would provide some value. I think Seth Jones is a good example of that. A guy's going to play on the first power play and even strength with Connor Bedard. So I'd keep an eye on that guy too.
I'm taking him wherever I can get him. I'm taking Seth Jones wherever, because he also had a bit of a down year, right? And he hasn't had much to work with in Chicago. But I think that absolutely, I'm excited for what Jones can do. And I've never been someone that's super loved him, but he covers a lot of categories. He's the for sure top power play quarterback there. No one else is going to take that from him, as much as I like Kevin Korchinski and White Kaiser and whoever else. But yeah, I definitely am all for a big season from Seth Jones.
All right, the last thing I'll mention on Bedard. So for each of these players, we've got the ADP here, their Calder odds, and their points prediction. So Yahoo ADP for Bedard is 36.2. Fantrax is 51.9. Calder odds right now, according to DraftKings, are minus 140. And then our projection is 74 points and 42 goals. With that, we're going to move on to Luke Hughes, who right now is going in Yahoo drafts on average at 119, in Fantrax at 217. Calder odds are plus 750. Our projection for him, 40 points and 6 goals. Victor, do you like the projection? And then the other thing too is I'm finding, at least in Yahoo, he's going way too early. There's a lot of other defensemen. We've got Aaron Ekblad, Drew Doughty, Justin Falk, Chris Letang, Tony DeAngelo. All these guys are going after Luke Hughes right now. Is that right in your mind?
No, that's crazy. Come on, guys. I love prospects here, but there's no way I'm taking Luke Hughes ahead of those guys. I mean, he's great, and he's the future, no doubt about it. But, is he going to get that much time on ice? Is he going to get that much opportunity, that much power play? I'm sure they're going to give him ozone starts and kind of shelter his deployment a little bit. So maybe he gets to 40. I think that that's possible, but I'm not counting on that. I think a successful season for him would be not getting caved in defensively and putting up 25 points. So, is that worthwhile in fantasy? No, I'm not excited about that. I do think that it's possible. And certainly if Dougie Hamilton get injured, then they might turn to him. They might give him more opportunity, but there's just they have one of the best, already there. And I'm sure that Jack and Luke are going to love playing together, but it's just not quite time yet, I don't think, for Luke. So I would not, I probably don't think I would even draft him, frankly. I think there's some other rookie defensemen that are probably a little bit more exciting just because they have better opportunity. So no, I wouldn't do that.
Okay. Bruce, John, Tyler, any difference of opinion on Luke Hughes for next season?
Yeah, no, I'm probably not drafting him. Not
Same.
at the beginning of the season anyway. See what happens during the season.
Yeah, I might take a flyer late, but I do like the brothers playing together. I like what he kind of showed. I know it was only a couple games last year, but he does look like he's going to be elite. So I don't know. They have a pretty good decor there. So
Tough to see that one really playing out for him. Are you going to put a little sprinkle on him, Tyler, for the Calder at plus 750?
no, I don't think so. The sprinkle would be nice, but I really think it is Bedard unless he gets hurt. The goalies don't win Calders for the most part, and defensemen
Stuart Skinner.
Exactly, and defensemen don't really when there's a forward like Bedard there. So.
All right. Well, we got a couple guys here that could probably challenge Bedard for the Calder in Logan Cooley and Adam Fantilli. And we'll start with Cooley, who we've already talked about a little bit, but left wing, right wing eligible. Right now going in Yahoo at 162.5, Fantrax at 225. Calder odds are at plus 1,100. 21 goals and 55 points is our projection for Cooley. And Tyler, I think at plus 1,100, I would put a little bit of a sprinkle on Logan Cooley because I think he can challenge Bedard. If anyone can challenge Bedard this year, I think it's probably him.
I think you're probably right, but I still, with Bedard, like there's not that many players that can score from distance with a snapshot that like Bedard can. So I think that'll be the difference. I think that'll translate well to the NHL game. Even when you look at somebody like McDavid, last season he started to shoot from distance and score, but he tried to kind of stick handle it into the net. I don't think Bedard's going to do that. I think it's going to be shooting from everywhere. And I like Logan Cooley, but I just think Bedard's still just on a different level than him.
I think that's fair, but Victor, you're kind of the resident expert in this area. So what do you think? Logan Cooley, any chance for the Calder, and how does he compare to Bedard?
Well, he's a very different player. I mean, Cooley is going to be that's weird. It's listed as left wing, right wing. He's a center. So he's going to be your kind of eventual 200-foot, everything situation type of pivot. And so he's going to be working on all those things. Bedard is always going to be a scoring forward. Like he's not going to be the guy you put out there to shut down anyone else. Cooley will get some of that. And so he is a little bit of a different type of player. And this season, as I mentioned earlier, I just think he has more to work with. I don't think that he's going to put up more points than Bedard, but it's possible if everything goes right and if Bedard kind of, has an injury or doesn't quite translate it as well. But they're very different kinds of players. And certainly you want Bedard, but Cooley is, especially if you're talking like face-off wins and other categories, like Cooley could have more value in certain formats, down the road. But no, it's definitely Bedard's race to lose, I would say, as a forward.
All right, let's go to Adam Fantilli, who, again, I think the situation in Columbus is favorable to Chicago, obviously, but some other positions too for some of these young rookies. And he's going right now at 168 in Yahoo, 217 in Fantrax. Calder odds are also plus 1,100, and our projection for him is 22 goals and 56 points. So, Victor, as you know, I got him third overall in our Dynasty League. I'm bullish on Fantilli. Where do you have him projected points-wise, and do you like him to challenge any shots at all? Is he going to be one of those final three guys in the conversation at the end of the year?
I don't think so. I mean, I think Fantilli is awesome, but one thing that kind of works against him is that Columbus looks like it's ready. They're ready to take a step. They had so much unluckiness last season with all the injuries, and just by having everyone healthy and by some of their prospects maturing, I mean, Kent Johnson being a year older, Texier's coming back, Gaudreau and Laine looked better at the end of the season. Marchenko took a step. Their defensemen are going to be healthy again. They brought in a bunch, Severson and Provorov. The whole team is just going to be so much better. So that's going to be a little bit harder for Fantilli to shine just because there's so many other good options is my only concern with him. I think his talent, I mean, sure you could say the other way and say, oh, he has a lot more to work with, but it's also going to be harder for him to fight for that top, power play and top deployment. So I like your projection on Cooley much more, frankly. I think that he's more likely to be in that 50 to 60 point range. I'm sure that Fantilli could, but I think the variance there is much higher because he could just, they could stick him on the third line and say, you got to earn your stripes a little bit more, buddy. But he certainly could. And he has all the potential, in the world to have super high upside. He's also a bit older for his draft class. So he, being a little bit older, a little bit more mature, he's actually closer in age to Cooley. So, but yeah, I think that both of those guys at that range in terms of what you'd have to pay to get a big payoff are certainly reasonable bets.
So I guess I'll ask you this as well. You probably see Boone Jenner keeping his top line center and power play one role then?
Well, who's going to take the face off? Like, it's not going to be Fantilli.
Yeah.
He may be eventually, but he's not there. And so Jenner's going to be out there to do all the heavy lifting and do things like win faceoffs. And so he's going to get his time on ice. He's going to get plenty of deployment. But certainly, Fantilli will probably be out there at times too. So Jenner is definitely going to be value, but he's also not really a top line center, right? Like he's more of a second or third liner, but they need Fantilli to take a step. Jack Roslovic is also not a first line center. So they really have a bunch of second and third line centers on their team. So someone's going to have to play up top. It might be Fantilli. Maybe he earns it by the end of the season, but I kind of doubt it.
All right. Let's move on to Devin Levi. We've talked about him a bit already, but in Yahoo right now, 92.5, Fantrax 184, Calder odds are plus 1,200. And I like those. Hearing you talk about Devin Levi, I think at plus 1,200, that's another guy I'd look at if I'm putting some money down. Our projection for him was 41 starts and 24 wins. Just honestly not knowing exactly how the split's going to work because UPL is still there. They've got is it Eric Comrie? So it's just, who knows? But I'm willing to bet on Devin Levi for this season. Is that a guy you could see being in the final three for the conversation in the Calder?
Of all these guys, he would be my bet. I'm not really a betting guy, but I think in terms of the odds and the situation and, goalies are just more variable. So, who does he have to pass to have a big opportunity? I think neither of those guys have really cemented themselves. They've all been kind of shown to be not great at times. They've had stretches, but they've never really been able to sustain it. And I know that Levi only had 7 starts or whatever, but he was pretty great in all of them. So, and they were high pressure situations. So I definitely think that he doesn't have as big obstacles to overcome. The team seems primed to take an next step. They barely missed the playoffs. So, I think that everyone is going to be a year older, the evolving superstars they have on that team. I think that it's going to be a great situation for Levi to step into. And, things are variable with goalies. He could just get on a hot run. And I think all he would have to do realistically is play 50, 55 games and win, 30, 35 and make the playoffs, and he wins a Calder. I think that's a little bit easier than what you're talking about with some of these other guys, right? Like, what does Fantilli and Cooley have to do? Score 70, 80 points? I just don't think that's going to happen. Even some of these other guys we're going to talk about after this, like they could have amazing seasons for what's expected of them, and that's still probably not going to be enough.
Yeah, if Buffalo makes the playoffs this year, it's and if Levi's a part of it, that's a very strong case for him to win the Calder.
Yep.
Bruce, I know you kind of have the opposite opinion on this one. You've kind of been a real Debbie Downer on Devin Levi.
Wow.
Yeah, it's it's the contract situation, right? So they've got two goalies under contract already. Levi is still waivers eligible. So I don't see him playing in the first part of the season. I think they're going to run with UPL and Comrie and see how it goes. And if it doesn't go well, then I can see Levi entering the conversation. But the beginning of the season, I just don't see him up with the big club.
Alrighty. On that note, let's move on to Brant Clark here. This is an interesting one. So ADP in Yahoo right now, 157, Fantrax 236. Calder odds are plus 2,500. Our points projection for him, 35 points and 7 goals. He posted 23 goals and 61 points in 31 OHL games last year. Pretty dang good. I wonder if part of the conversation about moving Sean Durzi was that they got a guy like Brent Clark, waiting to take a step forward here. So I'll start with Tyler. Actually, do you like Brent Clark? Are you taking a flyer on this guy late in drafts, or are you just gonna wait and see where he goes?
I'm probably gonna wait and see with Doughty there. At the stage that the team's at, I just don't feel that they're gonna give him all the opportunity that he probably needs. But I think I would definitely be watching the waiver wire for him.
Okay. John, have you spent any time watching Brent Clark? I mean, you like junior hockey. Is that a guy you've had your eye on at all?
Yeah, he's definitely put himself out there. He's made a name for himself, and for good reason. But yeah, I think I'm with Tyler on this one. I'm not sure I'd be drafting him, but I would definitely be keeping an eye on the waiver wire for sure.
Okay. Victor, any additional thoughts on Brent Clark?
There are 11 million reasons why he's not going to get the top power play, and those are going to Drew Doughty. So I love Clark, and I think that he is the future, but Doughty has been good. He's been good for a long time. He's getting paid. He's still serviceable. He's still capable. I think that he might earn some deployment, but I just don't think he's going to get enough time. And him just playing on the third pairing and, keeping his head above water, he's had some skating issues and defending the rush. So if he could just do that and contribute, 20, 30 points, that'll be a win. That's not going to be enough for the Calder.
All right, fair enough. For all those Leafs fans out there, let's talk about Matthew Nyes. Yahoo ADP 159, Fantrax 233. Calder odds are plus 2,500. Our projection for him is 42 points and 15 goals. Bruce, any interest in Matthew Nyes to win the Calder this year?
No, he's not going to win the Calder. No. They literally would have to glue him to Matthew and Marner's and feed him everything for him to have even a slim chance at getting the Calder trophy. It's not with... If Levi does end up coming out of camp, the starting goalie for Buffalo, and has a great season, Fantilli, Cooley, Bedard, sorry. He might be fourth, might be.
Yeah. I think the only reason why people are going to be talking about him is because he plays in Toronto.
Yeah.
That's
everybody in Toronto talking about him.
Yeah.
We ever heard this story before? Yeah. Well, and I think maybe he could have been more in the conversation had he been next to Matthews and Marner, like you said, Bruce. But I mean, the Leafs are trying to win, right? They're a 50-win team. Like they got Bertuzzi there, even Domi to a lesser extent, right? Like there's other players that could right now play ahead of Matthew Nyes. So, Victor, any other thoughts on him?
Well, not to spoil the fun Leafs hate going on, but no, I agree. He probably is being talked about way too much because of the situation in Toronto. But I also think that, man, he was so good in the playoffs. Like he came in to a really difficult situation right out of college, and he was some shifts their best player, which is pretty rare to say. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not saying he's going to go crazy or anything, but I do think that at these odds plus 2,500, that's, I think that I might be more tempted to put money on him than Cooley and Fantilli, just because the odds are so much better. And yeah, he could play with Marner, Matthews, Tavares, whatever. And, he could put up pretty decent numbers, probably not enough to win, but I think he could end up being, certainly a pretty great streamer, maybe even someone that you hold depending on if the deployment sticks for a while. But I definitely am interested in Nyes. But yeah, probably not going to draft him. Just kind of see what happens and keep my eye on him. And if he's sticking on the top six, maybe even gets top line and runs with it, there could be some good value there.
All right, Luke Evangelista in Nashville. He is going undrafted right now in Yahoo. Fantrax almost undrafted at 294. Calder odds are plus 3,000. Our projection for him is 21 goals and 47 points. And really, there's not a lot in Nashville, particularly on the right side. I think Gustav Nyquist is the only player really ahead of him right now on the depth chart. And that's debatable, right? So I just wonder, he had 15 points and 7 goals in 24 games last season. played at a 51-point pace. So is this a guy that could be a deep sleeper for the Calder?
No, I don't think so. I do agree though that the kids are going to play in Nashville, but they have a lot of options, and they'll probably just move guys around, and so that's going to make it hard for any one of them to be really good. I do personally like Tommy Novak a lot, and I think Yuso Parson is also really talented. But again, it's like which one of those three is going to get the most deployment and points is kind of hard to tell, and so I probably wouldn't, bet on any of them. But they're all certainly interesting to stream or to look at depending on the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly, as you mentioned, if as a right wing, that is a really weak position. So that might put things ahead because I think Novak is going to be a center, so that might make it a little harder to roster him.
All right, Dustin Wolf. Just in the interest of time, we'll move on here. Dustin Wolf, right now undrafted in Yahoo, 381 in Fantrax. I don't think his Calder odds are correct, so I'm gonna leave that alone. But I mean, he's done everything he can at the AHL level. I'm not sure we can expect much more. But it's going to be like he's a long shot to win the Calder at this point.
Yeah, definitely.
The longest.
The longest. Well, like the player, it's if Vladar is still there for 2 more years, I think, and Markstrom for 3 or 4. So it's going to be tough sledding for him. Marco Rossi, plus 4,000. He is undrafted in Yahoo right now, which could be interesting. 294 in Fantrax. It really interesting to see where he's going to go. But any interest in the Marco Rossi for the Calder?
This is where you put a sprinkle.
I was just thinking that.
This is where you sprinkle.
And just hope he plays somewhere in the top 6.
Yeah. I think like this is kind of the time for him to kind of actually show up and play some games. So, I think he's probably 3 or 4 behind Bedard and the other guys to be close for a Calder vote here. So, and he's in a good position there too, with a good team.
Okay, so you're telling me there's a chance.
There's a chance.
There's a chance.
This is the sprinkle spot.
All right, Victor, you're not a big bettor. Are you willing to take a chance on Marco Rossi though?
I mean, sure. That's a really, really low odds or good odds, I guess, however you want to phrase it. So certainly, as we talked about earlier, I think he doesn't have a long way to go. I think if he gets the opportunity, which he certainly could, he could run with it. But I'm not holding out hope that that's going to happen.
All right. And then I think the last guy that we really wanted to talk about here is Joel Hofer, who is going undrafted in Yahoo, 372 in Fantrax. I have no Calder odds for him and no projection as well. But given the play of Jordan Binnington, he has just gone down and down in each of the last 4 seasons, I believe. Basically, since he came in, won a cup, and then he's just continues to decline.
Painful death.
Slow, painful death. Well, and Bruce, you can talk about that plenty.
Oof. Yeah, I've drafted Binnington way too many times and been burned every time.
So is this the year that, will Joel Hofer start stealing some time from Jordan Binnington, or is the contract situation just too prohibitive, Bruce?
It's going to all depend on Binnington's play. If Binnington shows up like he did last year during the regular season, you're going to see a lot of Hofer during the regular season. Binnington played well in the playoffs until he got hurt. Mm-hmm. But in the regular season, he was terrible. And they did it off back of Hofer and then Husso the year before. So I don't have a whole lot of time for Binnington. I would be curious to take a flyer on Hofer because I think he may end up with the lion's share of the starts, especially if the season goes sideways for the Blues.
All right, Victor, what are your thoughts on Joel Hofer? I mean, obviously for dynasty and keeper purposes, a player you want to keep an eye on, but for this season, where does Joel Hofer stand for you?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think he's got a great opportunity. I mean, Binnington is basically Cam Ward, right? Won a cup for a season, terrible ever since, downward spiral, but had the contract and kept getting trotted out there, start after start after start. And yeah, he's had some decent play here and there, but by and large, if you look at the sample size, it's trended downhill. $6 million is certainly a decent cap hit, but I think that Hofer has a pretty good chance to pull a Binnington on Binnington. He's had that happen already. I mean, Husso kind of outplayed him and then earned a contract out of town. I think Hofer could do the same. So certainly in like a 0G strategy, Hofer's someone you should probably be interested in because he has a pretty good chance. And I think, St. Louis is really trying to kind of turn the corner here. And I don't think it's going to happen with Binnington. It's going to be Hofer if they want to try to compete. So I definitely think you should have your eye on him. I probably not a Calder candidate, but stranger things have happened.
I think if Hofer starts getting starts, Binnington's going to try and fight him or something.
Goalie fight on the bench as opposed to on the ice.
We are coming up against it here, guys, for time. I just really quickly, Victor, Logan Stankoven, is there any path for regular minutes for him in the NHL this season, or is that roster too deep right now?
I mean, if you believe in what's happening in preseason, certainly. But I find it kind of hard to believe that there is a spot, but he is really that talented. He's just so good. And I know he's small. He's like 5'8", 5'7". But when you look at these smaller players, you have to ask yourself what they do that's above NHL average. And for some players, the shot or the skating or the playmaking. And for Logan Stankoven, it's pretty much all of those things. He's really, really just good at all of them. He's a tenacious back checker. He's not a defensive liability. He's an excellent playmaker. He's got a great shot. He's fast. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. That's it for time. All right. We're still live streaming here on YouTube, but our time on Edmonton Sports Talk is done. So, Victor, thank you very much for sticking around and talking with us. It's been a pleasure as always. We're going to release this episode through our podcast feed as well. So just for anyone that's going to listen to this afterwards, maybe just give our listeners an idea of where they should follow you on social media and one more time where they can find your content.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. You can find me on Twitter. I refuse to call it X at Victor Nuno 12, VICTORNUNO 12. And at EP Rinkside is the site where I have my writings. You can follow my podcast that I have, Fantasy Hockey Life, where we talk mainly prospects, dynasty, and kind of deeper leagues. And the other podcast is Dobber Prospects Report that I do with Peter Harling, and that we pretty much just talk about prospects. With Fantasy Hockey Life, we talk about some NHLers and dynasty situations. But that's basically my jam and where you can find me.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks again, Victor. Really appreciate it. I'm totally on board with you calling it Twitter and not X. We're right there with you. So for anyone that wants to find us, you can find us over at Fantasy Hockey Hacks on Twitter at FHHacks. We're on Instagram as well and on Threads, Fantasy Hockey Hacks. Check out the website, fantasyhockeyhacks.com. And as I mentioned earlier, make sure you check out Heavy Hockey. Great website, lots of Oilers content, but also lots of just general hockey content as well. And give us a follow or subscribe on YouTube. We'll be live streaming this show on Wednesday nights at 9 and then Oilers Live Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll talk to you next week.
Night.
Good night.